Moshe Rabbeinu, in our tradition, is seen as the man who reached human achievement, as Noten Torah, the giver of the Torah, as Adon HaNevi'im, the master of all prophets. But who was Moshe Rabbeinu before he became Moshe Rabbeinu? Why was he chosen from all of the human beings on the earth to be the one to take the people out of Mitzrayim and to be the chosen one to give the Torah? What was his merit? What was his chut? Or who was Moshe Rabbeinu before he became Moshe Rabbeinu? I would like to go back to Moshe, the man, the child. In order to understand something about the essence of Moshe, as Reb Tzadok HaKohen Milublin would say, one should go back to the beginning, to the first time that the person or the concept appears. That is the essence of that person and that concept. So if we want to understand something about the essence of leadership, or the essence of our first leader, Moshe, we have to go to the first time where he appears as a grown man, when he has choice. And it says in Sefer Shmot, Perek Bet, it says about Moshe, Vayehi bayamim ahem, Vayigdal Moshe vayetze el echav, Vayar besivlotam, Vayar ish mitzri, Makeh ish ivri me'echav. Source 1 here on the page. What does it say? And in those days, Moshe grows, Vayigdal. And what is the first thing that he does as a grown man? He goes out to his brothers and he looks at their sevel, at their burdens. Now Rashi says, where it says here, Vayi bayamim hahem Vayigdal, Rashi notices that Vayigdal appears twice. Because if you see at the end of source 2, in Pasuk Yud, it says, in verse 10, Vayigdal hayeled, vativi'eu levat paro vayila leven, vatikra et shmo Moshe, vatomer ki min hamayim mishitihu. As it says that when the child grew up and the daughter of Pharaoh brings the child, and the child grew, and the mother brought him onto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called him Moshe, and said, because I drew him out of the water. Here also it says, Vayigdal hayeled, and the child grew. Rashi says here, in source number 3, what does it mean, Vayigdal twice? Why is there the repetition that he grew? And Rashi says, source number 3, Valo kvar ktiv Vayigdal hayeled. It already says Vayigdal. He's quoting Chazal, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, ברבי אילאי, הראשון לקומה והשני לגדולה שמינהו פרעה על ביתו. Was it not already previously written and the lad had grown? So Rav Yehuda says, son of Eli, the first reference of Vayigdal is to his height, and the second to his greatness, for Pharaoh appointed him overseer of his house. What is the first thing that Moshe does when he grows in status? He goes out to his brothers to see their burdens. So many times we see when people grow in status, get a job, become great, have greatness of a position, they close themselves off from the world. Then it's so hard to get to them. But here, the greatness of Moshe, as if we look at source at the Bet Yisrael, the Rabbi Migur al Parashat Shmot, it says in source number 9, Shemedukdak berashi, and maybe I'll read this in English, as it says, Rashi points out that the word Vayigdal, and he grew, appears twice, and this is a hint to the greatness of Moshe, who was pained by the troubles of the children of Israel. And he evoked to the powers above to feel their pain. So what he's saying, the Rabbi Migur, that the greatness of Moshe is not his appointment, but the greatness of Moshe is that he saw the pain of others. And then Rashi points out another thing. And I'm going back to the text in Shmot. It says, Vayehi bayamim hahem, and it came at those days when he grew, Vayigdal Moshe. What does he do? Vayetze lechav, vayar בסבלותם, וירא איש מצרי מכה איש עברי מאחיו. Says Rashi, וירא, and he saw, appears twice. Rashi explains, again in source number 3, in the continuation of source number 3, and I'll read in Hebrew and then I'll translate. וירא בסבלותם, נתן עיניו וליבו להיות מצר עמהם. And he saw, and it says Rashi, and he saw their burdens, he cast his eyes and heart to feel their distress. There's one thing to see with physical eyes when you see someone in the street, when you see someone hungry, someone in pain, someone sad. But another thing is to see with your heart, meaning to have empathy. And that is the greatness of Moshe, which it says also, if you look at source number 4 in Midrash Lekachtov, it says, and in those days Moshe grew and went out, although Moshe was in the Pharaoh's court, he went to witness the sufferings of Israel. He was a prince of Egypt. He could have stayed in the palace. And he's saying this is a limud, a teaching for us, for all generations, that it is what Hillel taught, don't separate yourself from the community. In Pirkei Avot it says that. One should not see the community in pain and say to himself, I'll go home, eat, drink, and enjoy peace unto my soul. Rather, he should share in the burden of others. And if we think how meaningful that is for the time that we are in now, these difficult days, these challenging days, this source talks to us, Midrash Lekachtov, and Moshe is talking to us and telling us, the whole world is in pain. There are people suffering. We all are having problems now with the corona, but there are more than others. Maybe there are people that are alone, people that need help. We should not just close ourselves off, even though we're closing ourselves off physically, but we should reach out to others and see if we can assist people. We should reach out and have empathy with our heart. And this is what the Midrash Lekachtov is saying to us. And this is what Moshe is doing. He's going out and he is seeing the others. You know, there's a beautiful story about Reb Aryeh Levin. Reb Aryeh Levin was considered, in Hebrew, he was called Tzaddik HaYerushalmi, or Avi HaYetomim, Avi HaAlmanot, father of the widows, father of the orphans, of the lepers. He would go visit the lepers, or some know him as Tzaddik in his time. So Reb Aryeh Levin was very, very poor. He didn't have much. He had a tiny house. And people, by the hundreds or thousands, would go into his tiny house. All the schleppers, all the people that didn't have much would go in sad and would come out happy. And once Reb Aryeh Levin was asked, Reb Aryeh, what do you give them? You don't have anything. How come they come in crying and they go out happy? And Reb Aryeh Levin says, I really don't know. All I do is they come, they tell me their troubles, I listen, and I cry with them. What Reb Aryeh Levin would call that, to listen with our heart, to see with our heart. And that is the essence of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now Moshe, before he becomes Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe the man. After that, it's not enough. We have Vayar once that he sees with his eyes, Vayar that he sees with his heart, but we have a third Vayar where it says in Pasuk Yud Bet, Vayifen kovacho Vayar ki en ish. Now the translation is, and he looked this way and that way, and he saw that there was no man, and then he smote the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. What does it mean, Vayifen kovacho vayar kein ish? So maybe in Pshat is, he looked around to see that nobody's seeing him, and he beat the Egyptian who was inflicting and beating to death his brother Jew. But another way of looking at it, as some of the commentaries say, what does it mean, Vayifen kovacho? He looked around and he saw that nobody helped. Nobody had the courage to help, or maybe everybody in the troubles that they were in the slavery already were so indifferent. And there was nobody who would stand up and help the suffering person, the suffering Jew, the suffering Hebrew. So leadership is also taking a stand, rising to the occasion, and looking around and saying, Vayal ki en ish heye ish, nobody standing up, I will make a difference. I will be a leader. I will care. That's the third Vayar. And the first story is when he sees an ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'echav, when he sees an Egyptian inflicting, beating a brother Jew. The second story that we have here is when he goes out on the second day and he sees two brothers fighting and he interferes. And the third story is when he runs away and he sees the daughters of Yitro, where the shepherds were bothering them. I'm looking here in the Pasuk, and the shepherds came, I'm in Pasuk 17, Yud Zayin, and drove them away, but Moshe stood up and helped them and watered their flock. That's the third story. Now, what do all of these stories have in common? Nechama Leibowitz spoke about this in her commentary on Sefer Shemot, and she says, why do we need all these three stories? They seem to repeat themselves. But says Nechama, first of all, the three is chazaka. Three is saying that there's a pattern. It's not just one day he walked out and he had this pain and he saw his brother and he was willing to help. But the fact that it repeats itself says that there is a midah, a trait of Moshe. And she's saying even more than that. The first story where he sees an anti-Semite hurting his brother, that we can understand. He connects to his brother. He stands up for that. That's common. The second story where he sees social injustice and he sees two brothers fighting together, that we also can see. It's his nationalistic connection to his brothers. The third story, where he is escaping as a refugee from the wrath of Paro to Midian, and he has nothing, and he sees these shepherds' daughters of Yitro, and he helps them when he doesn't even know them, and he's a stranger. That's even stronger. Says Nechama, these three stories are stories that are telling us about the characteristic of Moshe the man. Moshe was chosen because he pursues justice. He's always helping the weak, the impoverished. He's always standing when he sees that there's wrongdoing. Moshe goes and acts. And that is the essence of leadership, and that is the essence of our first leader, Moshe. Now the Rambam says in source, let's find the Rambam here. The Rambam says in source 12, in Moreh Nevuchim. Says the Rambam in the Guide of the Perplexed, there are 11 levels to get to Nevuah, to get to prophecy. Now, what is the beginning of prophecy? What is the first stage to begin? And I'm reading in English here. The first degree of prophecy consists in the divine assistance which is given to a person and induces and encourages him to do something good and grand, to deliver a congregation of good men from the hands of evildoers, to save one noble person, or to bring happiness to a large number of people. He finds in himself, that person, the cause that moves and urges him to this deed. This degree of divine influence is called the Spirit of the Lord, Ruach Hashem. And of this person is under that influence, we say that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, Ruach Hashem was on him, clothed him, or rested upon him, or the Lord was with him, and the like. This faculty was always possessed by Moshe from the time that he had attained the age of manhood, as it said, Vayigdal Moshe. It moved him to slay the Egyptian and to prevent evil from the two men that quarreled. It was so strong that after he had fled from Egypt out of fear and arrived in Midian, a trembling stranger, He could not restrain himself from interfering when he saw wrong being done. He could not bear it. And as it says, and Moses rose and saved them. Vayakam vayoshi en. Says the Rambam, what is the beginning of prophecy? One might think to learn a lot of Torah, to say Tehillim, to bathe in the mikveh, to meditate, to go out to the desert. Says the Rambam, the first thing is to do good, to help another human being. That is the essence of connection to God. That's where it starts. That's how a person starts becoming worthy of God's message to him, of being a prophet. And this is what we see from Moshe. That's the beginning. Raising up to pursue justice and help others. Now, where did Moshe Rabbeinu learn this? Where did he grew up in Pharaoh's palace, which only taught cruelty. So says the Rabbi Migur, in source number, we saw that source already, in source number 9, says the Bet Yisrael, that he learned it from his mother and his sisters. And I would like to say his mother, his two mothers and sister. If we go back to Moshe's beginning in source number 2, when he was only a child, when he was a baby. And we look in the story and that we see that the heroines in this story were the mother, the sister, and the daughter. All of them worked to save that baby. All of them bestowed love on him. The mother giving birth to him and hiding the baby. Miriam standing there, protecting the baby. And right away when she sees the daughter of Pharaoh, she sees an opportunity and she says, should I go and I call a midwife who will nurse, a wet nurse, not a midwife, sorry, a wet nurse, who will nurse the child. And that was a great idea. She went and called her mother. And the third heroine in the story, which is least expected, is the daughter of Pharaoh, who reaches out her hand, a hand of compassion, and she, as it says, "Vatachmol alav," she had compassion, and she saves that child and decides to raise that child as her own child. Now, all of these women in the story, what do they have in common? None of them have a name. If you look, the key word in the story, in the text, in source number 2 is Hayeled, that appears 7 times. And we know 7 is a very important number in literature, but especially in Yahadut, 7. Shabbat, the sabbatical year. Telling us, focus on that word Hayeled, that appears 7 times. Telling us that all of these women don't have a name because they are altruistic. All of them are functioning to save this child, this helpless child. It's not about them. It's about giving love, sacrificing, endangering their life to save this child. This is what they all have in common. Now this child, Moshe, grew up to be, and if we go back to text number 1, to source number 1, Shmot Perek Bet, from Pasuk Yud Aleph, verse Yud Aleph, we see the key word is Ha'ish, that appears 7 times, telling us that Moshe became the kind, compassionate, one who has empathy for the suffering of his brothers, one who pursues justice, one who is willing to endanger his life for others. He is the one. How did he become that? He became the man that he is because of the love that was bestowed on him by the women in his life, by his mother Yocheved, by his sister Miriam, and by the tzadikat, chasidat, umot haolam, bat Paro, the daughter of Paro. They made him the man that he is, and that's what the Rabbi Migur says. Now, at what point did God exactly decide to choose Moshe and appear to Moshe. We go to source number 10, we see. It says, Moshe in Shmot Perek Gimel, chapter 3. Moshe haya ro'eh et tzon Yitro. And Moshe was the shepherd of Yitro, his father-in-law. Chotno Kohen Mitnag. And it says, I'll read in English, and he led the flock to the furthest of the wilderness and came to the mountain of God onto Horeb. And the angel of God appeared unto him in a flame of fire, that's the sneh that we all know, out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Moreover, he said, God appears to him and says to him, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the afflicted of my people that are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their pains. And let us look in Ivrit a little bit in source 10, because I think it's stronger, the verb that is used that we already have been mentioning. Look at Pasuk Bet. Vayere malach Adonai vayere אליו בלבת אש מתוך הסנה, וירא, והנה סנה בוער באש, והסנה איננו עוקל. Moshe sees, and then what does it say in Pasuk Vav? ויאמר אנוכי אלוהי אביך, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, ויסתר משה פניו כי ירא מהבית אלוהים. And then God says to him, ויאמר אדוני, ראו, ראיתי את עוני עמי אשר במצרים, ואת צעקתם שמעתי מפני נוגשיו, כי ידעתי את מכאוביו. The verb vaya'al appears here. Moshe sees the sneh, and God sees. Now, in source 11, in Shmot Rabbah, Chazal are dorish this juxtaposition between the fact that Moshe was a shepherd and between the fact that right when he's a shepherd, God appears to him. And it says, our rabbi said that when Moshe, our teacher, peace upon him, was tending the flock of Yitro in the wilderness, a little kid is the baby goat, the gedi, escaped from him. He ran after it until it reached a shady place. When it reached the shady place, there appeared to view a pool of water, and the kid, the gedi, stopped to drink. When Moshe approached that little goat, he said, I did not know that you ran away because of the first. You must be wary. So he placed the little goat, the kid, on his shoulder and walked away. Thereupon God said, because thou hast mercy in leading the flock of a mortal, thou wilt surely tend my flock of Israel. Hence, that's what it says. Now Moshe was tending the flock. It says that Moshe was the shepherd and God appears to him. What this midrash is saying here, Moshe showed compassion not only to a human being, but even to animals. That tendency, that trait of Moshe is so intrinsic that it's to all. Not only to human beings, not only to his brothers, not only to foreigners, to the daughters of Yitro, to Gentiles, but also even to a little goat, even. And that's why God appears to him. Says, again, the Rabbi Migor in source 9, he says like this. In Rashi, it says, before that, yes. In Rashi, it says, line 1, 2, 3, 4 from the top of source 9. In Rashi, it says, he gave his attention, turned his heart, it's talking about God, that God saw, to them, and he did not ignore them, turn his eyes away. God no longer turned his eyes away. Why? This may have been caused by Moshe Rabbeinu's self-sacrifice for the nation of Israel, And this is a great lesson for the people of Israel. He continued in the ways of his sister and his mother. Saying that why did God appear to Moshe? Because Moshe had compassion. God opened the windows of heaven, the windows of his heart, as if, because Moshe, the man, opened his heart. And what the Rabbi Migor is saying, that is a lesson not just for the generation of Moshe, but that is a lesson for all of us, in all generations. If we want God to take heed, if we want God to have compassion on us and save us, we have to have compassion on our fellow man. In source 14, there's a beautiful Gemara that says, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, a man should not pray save in a room which has windows. A man should only pray in a room that has windows. Says Rav Kook about that in source 15, why should we only pray in a room with windows? And I'm reading Rav Kook in Einaya. Although prayer is an internal function of the soul, prayer is something, contemplation with myself, it is critical that one recognize the value of relating to the outside world. In order for the power of the prayer to act upon a person, praying and his companions, one whose prayer separates him from all connection to the world outside, will not achieve the full purpose of prayer, that one should be inspired by the Spirit of Hashem, which should rejuvenate one to act in righteousness and integrity. Therefore, one should only pray in a house which has windows, for the opportunity to see the outside world, which will inspire him towards his obligations to the world in which he lives. Says Rav Kook that when we pray, we have to pray with thinking of the outside world, and that's what the windows help us do. We don't just pray for our own salvation, for our own problems, but the prayer has to evoke, as he says, for us, what it has to inspire us to do is to tikkun olam, to care for the world outside, to think of our obligations for the world outside, to mend the world and bring salvation to the world and care for the sufferings for others. That's what the windows remind us. Now that's what Pesach is all about. It says in the Haggadah of Pesach, in source 16, בכל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות את עצמו כאילו יצא ממצרים. In every generation, a person is obligated to regard himself as if he had come out of Egypt. Now that is a very difficult thing. But I wasn't in Egypt. How can I see myself as if I was in Egypt? What is it, a game? Do I just say it? So the truth is that in our situation that we are in now, I think maybe we can understand what it means to be in Egypt a little bit, what it means to be inside and not to be totally free. But still, what is that? Why is it important? So first of all, I think the first thing is hakarat tov. Only when I, myself, experience tsa'ar, pain, I can have hakarat tov and gratitude to Hashem that I am free. And I think now in our situation of being inside, not being able to move freely, maybe this will bring us to have a little bit more hakarat tov, that we live in Eretz Yisrael and we are free in Medinat Yisrael, even though we have difficult times now, but we know that it will end, we will persevere. But let us not forget that we were in this place, that we weren't totally free. So first of all, I think that is one message. But another message is, why do we have to experience that Mitzrayim experience? So I think the answer is, many of our mitzvot, the reasoning given to the different mitzvot that we have, links us back to Yetziat Mitzrayim. We see in Shmot Perek Kaf Gimel Pasuk Tet, it says in source number 17, "Vegel lo tilchatz, v'atem yeda'atem et nefesh hagel, ki gerim hayitim be'eretz Mitzrayim." Do not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger, since you yourself were a stranger in the land of Egypt. Or it says, "V'samachta lifnei Hashem Elohecha," in Dvarim, "Ata v'agel v'yatom v'almana asher bekirbecha, v'zacharta ki eved hayita." Make sure that all those who do not have food, who do not have a family, who are alone, the ger, the yatom, the almanah, the stranger, the widow, and the fatherless, remember that they need to be sameach, they have to be happy in the Chag. And what does that link us back again? Remember the feeling, the zacharta ki eved hayita, what it was to be a stranger, what it was to be poor, what it was not to be free. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, meaning that memory is not just a cognitive memory. That memory is something that is supposed to bring us to act and care and feel others. And the Rambam says that in every Chag that we have, it says, Rambam, Hilchot Yom Tov, Perek Vav, Halacha Yudchet, source number 19, when a person eats and drinks at the festive meal, he is obligated to provide food for the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, along with the rest of people. But whoever locks the door of his courtyard, of his house, and eats and drinks with his wife and children, and does not provide food and drink for poor and suffering people, this is not a mitzvah celebration, but a celebration of the belly. And this kind of celebration is a disgrace. What the Rambam is telling us, when we sit down to celebrate and to eat on our festivity, on our holiday, on Pesach, at our Seder, as we know we're supposed to invite strangers for our Seder, even though this year is challenging. But even this year, even if we can invite strangers, we still can think, are there people who do not have enough money to buy food? Are there people that will not have food on Leila Seder? And even in these difficult times that maybe all of us are a little bit worrying about our financial situation, we still can think, are there people that need our assistance? Even if we physically cannot be with them in the Seder, are we thinking of those people? And this is the essence of what the Rambam's saying, a Chag. And this is the essence of remembering that we came out of Egypt. That experience of coming out of Egypt has to remind us about all those people who maybe are suffering and do not have enough food for that, for their festivity. The Rambam says in source 22, the law lays stress on this duty in several places. And thou shalt remember that thou hast been a slave. For it is to be feared that those who become great in riches and comfort might, as is generally the case, fall into the vices of influence and haughtiness and abandon all good. Rabbi Nachman Mibreslav says, Yetziat Mitzrayim hu bechol adam ubechol zman bechol shana v'shana v'kam bechol yom v'yom yesh bo bechinat Pesach v'yetziat Mitzrayim. The exodus from Egypt is for every person in all times, year and year out, and every single day has it in an aspect of Passover and the exodus from Egypt. Every day, says the Rabbi Nachman, in every generation, in every time, we must remember that we have to come out of Egypt. We have to remember that there are people that are still in bondage. There are people that are still suffering. We have to remember to pursue justice and to make sure that everybody comes out of Egypt. And we also have to take ourselves out of the Egypt, out of our different bondages that we are in. Moshe Rabbeinu, going back to the beginning, was chosen to be the one who gives the Torah, to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt, because he was a truly free man in his essence, a truly compassionate man who chose to see the others. And that teaches us something about Yahadut, that teaches us something about the basis and the essence of our Avodat Hashem, of the whole Torah. The Torah, the essence of the Torah, is to do good for others, to have compassion to others. And I wish us all, and I bless us all, and let us pray together, that this year we will be zoches soon to relieve ourselves from all of the sufferings and the bondage of each and every one of us, and each one in Am Yisrael. And I wish health and peace to the whole world that we live in.